Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name is Phil. Joining me as usual, I've got Rohan. Good morning, Rohan. How are you?
Morning. Good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. As usual, today's episode of the Home Assistant Podcast is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant, ESP Home, and ZWave.js projects. Configuration is done via the user interface, so no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML. Okay, Rohan, let's do this. It is the first week of September, first Wednesday of September. 2024.9 is here. September is obviously another special month for Home Assistant and Nabu Casa as well, as is birthday month. I believe Home Assistant is turning 11 now. They celebrated their 10th birthday last year. And Nabu Casa should be turning 6, if my maths is correct. So there's going to be a birthday stream, I believe, or something's going to be happening for the Home Assistant birthday at some point. So that'll be exciting. Watch out for that. But yeah, good. I just feel as though Home Assistant is now unstoppable. And I know we say this every year, but 11 years in software, particularly open source software, is a long time, right?
Yeah.
And thanks to Nabu Casa, everyone subscribing to Nabu Casa, being able to keep the project going, it's really locking that in. We've already seen big things this year, right?
And again, supporting other projects as well, right? I know that's part of our intro, but just genuinely it does, right? And it's ZWave.js and
yeah, absolutely. And now the Open Home Foundation as well, right?
Correct, right? Like even ESP Home and all of those kind of things, right? Which is actually really cool. So yeah, thanks for all the support, and and happy birthday to the Home Assistant group. This is the Nabu Casa group. It's awesome.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of support, Rohan, shout out to our new Patreons as well, Matt Parker and Init6 on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting what we're doing. You may have noticed we're trying to experiment with some new things. We've been doing shorts. We've got a whole bunch of episodes recorded now up front. That's all thanks to people like Matt and Init6 being able to support us on Patreon, giving us resources to do that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Speaking of other things that like Nabu Casa subscriptions have helped with, one of the things that just happened lately is Paul is joining the ZWave Alliance board. I know, Phil, you were on the creators call when they kind of talked about that.
So I know ZWave, obviously being the home automation protocol that has, it's basically a consortium, right? Like there's no company that, owns ZWave. There is Sigma that created ZWave, but it's sort of, they license out, my understanding of,
right.
This is how you can use ZWave in your products, right? And the consortium or the central body there says, okay, this is the spec for ZWave. If you want to have a light switch, it has to conform to this sort of way to communicate on the ZWave protocol. And that way, it doesn't matter if you're buying, Acme branded dimmer switches or Amazon branded dimmer switches. If they're ZWave, they should, in theory, maybe not all the time, but in theory, be able to communicate with each other because they're using a standard set of protocols. Unlike Zigbee, which just have, this is your spectrum that you can communicate on. We have some very loose standards over here, and then you get into this situation where you've got a Xiaomi or a Kara switch or light bulb that can't talk to Philips Hue hubs, for example, even though they're both Zigbee.
Yeah, and I think it's more of an open closed source kind of thing, right? Which is ZWave being more closed source ish, right? At least to the vendors, because it is a licensed technology. It means it has to work a certain way. So similar to HDMI, right? Almost all video devices or input or output use HDMI these days, or some form of HDMI, right? I know there's others, DisplayPort and so on, but for the most part, and that is a licensed technology, right? So that is something that if you have an LG monitor, LG has to pay that HDMI Alliance, I guess, group, whatever it's called. That there is a license fee for that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Again, but then that means everybody has to do it the same way, and therefore you kind of have conformance, right? Rather than the open to interpretation way of Zigbee.
So Z-Wave have the Z-Wave Alliance, what was Z-Wave Alliance, and as part of that, this is members of various companies, and they have a board to sort of shape the direction of where Z-Wave is going to go in the future. And Paulus has now been invited to join that board because Nabu-Casa is obviously doing a lot of things now with Z-Wave. They've got Z-Wave JS project that Nabu-Casa and the Open Home Foundation is supporting, which then can not only just power Home Assistant, but there's a lot of open source projects that can then be used by this, right? And of course, being open source, there is a lot of end users, and that means customers ultimately that are buying these Z-Wave products. So yeah, Paulus is now being invited onto a board. I know I've read some news article headlines ages ago about Z-Wave trying to open up and become more open source because there was a threat, from the likes of ZigBee sort of becoming that de facto, and Matter, becoming that de facto home automation standard, and Z-Wave was sort of being left in the old, we're proprietary, you've got to pay licensing fees and really expensive, products, right? So yeah, it's good to have the voice of Home Assistant users now being able to influence decisions for Z-Wave moving forward. So I think that's a great appointment.
No, that's actually fantastic.
So HACS 2.0 is another big thing that just came out in August. If you are using the Home Assistant community store, and good chance you are, there's a lot of good stuff on that. There is now a new version 2.0 has been released. They are not compatible with each other. It is a complete rewrite of, maybe not a complete rewrite, but it's a complete change to HACS in general. So there's a new user interface. It's now more deeply tied into Home Assistant itself. So when HACS came out originally, this way before I even think Nabu-Casa maybe, I don't know, seems like a while. We've now got repairs, there's updates, and it just seemed like HACS had its own little way of working. So things like now when a repository gets an update, so if you've got like a custom component that gets an update, there will now be an update entity from Home Assistant raised so that you can actually see, this repository is available. And you can now, I'm guessing because it's an update entity, you can potentially automate those updates being installed. Update flicks on, firing automation, install that update.
Yeah.
So that's good to see. And there's been a lot of people from Nabu-Casa helping out with getting this 2.0, right? It was a major change to HACS.
Yeah.
Even just even using the new search tables that they've got, the data tables in the back end.
Yeah.
If Home Assistant, it's all it looks consistent now. It doesn't look like you're entering a complete new world when you go into HACS because, hey, here I am.
Yeah. Which is nice too, because again, just to mention too, it's that also means because it's still a one same workflow that you're using, right? It's not, hey, I'm in HACS. This is like a completely separate thing that's in here. It does flow through really nicely. So,
yeah, and that's it. And what was interesting, and I guess one of the things that really prompted this change was that the HACS component alone, not just Home Assistant, but just HACS, was getting restricted by GitHub because of the sheer number of users using HACS. So HACS version 1, the way it works is that you would download the community store plugin, and then it would dial out using the GitHub API to fetch all the Home Assistant community repositories, right? So when you think that, let's say we've got 200,000 people installing HACS, now there's 200,000 API requests to GitHub being made to get all those repositories. And not to mention that every night they're going in and checking what's the new repositories, are you up to date, all that sort of fun stuff, right? So GitHub said, no, we're flooding us with so much traffic just to get all these community store add-ons, we're restricting the traffic to the point where Home Assistant was restricted in the number of repositories they were allowed to add to GitHub. I think they were only allowed to add roughly 5 or 6 repositories a week to GitHub to sort of, stop the barrage of API requests, because, it's a thing that keeps growing, right? The more repositories you add, the more API requests GitHub need to have. So HACS 2.0 has got a new API to proxy GitHub requests through HACS or through Nabu-Casa. So no longer does everyone need to go to GitHub directly to find out that information. The HACS 2.0 can now have its own endpoint living hosted by Nabucasa or Hax or whoever is running it, which can then collate all the repository information from GitHub, store it in a single place, and then only make a single request to GitHub. So there you go. Because of the restrictions on the repos, apparently there's been a whole bunch of new community-built add-ons that haven't been pushed out yet, and Nabucasa haven't been able to clear that backlog yet. So hopefully now that the more people that can upgrade to Hax 2.0, so if you are running 1.0, please, this is a good opportunity or a good reason to upgrade to 2.0, because the more people that upgrade to 2.0, the more less traffic there is flooding GitHub, and the more repositories GitHub will allow to be released for Hax. So
yeah, and it, again, like I said earlier, it looks nicer. It's easier to use too, for the most part. And then it is a little different in how you use it, right? In the sense that like where those repositories are found and so on and so forth. I think it's easier, but again, that might be just me thinking that, right? So let's talk about what's new in this release, Phil. So iOS widgets. I know. iOS widgets. So iOS already had widgets from the Home Assistant app. Those are typically ones that you'd have to, from the companion app. So that's typically something that you would set up, and you can do like quick actions and stuff like that, right? Like scenes and all those kind of things. Now they've updated those to look like tile cards, which is pretty cool.
And I do not have, I'm not an iOS iPhone user, so I can only assume that this is similar to an Android widget, much longer than iOS, but I won't. Please, if there is anyone on the Android team that can make Android widgets look better, I looked at widgets maybe like a month ago for Android, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I see it, but it still looks clunky. It doesn't look like a tile card. It looks clunky. Hopefully, maybe there could be some improvement there.
Yeah, I mean, it did look a little clunky on the iOS widgets before. I never really used them. I played around with them, but then, yeah.
The headline feature for 2024.9, I think, is going to be around the new dashboards, the section layouts that Home Assistant currently running in as experimental mode. So there is now the ability for cards can now be specified to span across, multiple. You can make them bigger essentially. So you can go in, edit a card, and say, I want this layout to stretch the whole width of the page. You can also specify how many columns it should span across. Now, it's hard for me to really convey this. I'm a web developer. I've used, like responsive design, and it doesn't really. It's not a one-to-one mapping to that. I get the logic of it. It's going to span, 3 out of 6 columns or all of that. But yeah, I guess there is some magic behind it. But essentially, the gist is that you can specify, it's this 50, 75%, 100% width. You can also just not only go horizontally, you can also go vertically. So how tall or how short does this card take up in space? So this is great for things like graphs, right? You can now say, I want a large graph or I want a small graph on the page. And I guess it just gives you another option to really customize the way those dashboards are being built, right? Badges have also been updated. So apparently there's a lot of feedback around badges in these new dashboards. So now there's the ability to hide the name, you can hide the state, and you can hide the icons if you don't want the icons. If you want something as minimal as possible, there's now options to show or hide all those little elements.
Interesting. So yeah, because I know one of the design elements that they took here is like similar to mushroom cards, how they have those chips, which encompass a lot of information in a small space very efficiently, I'd say.
Yeah.
Like it still looks good and everything, right? It's not ugly or it's not anything like that because of the information it shows. So I know that's one of those things that they were trying to bring here within the dashboard. So it sounds like there's been enough people throwing their hands up saying, hey, can we get the old school style badges, right? Which is basically just a little icon. I always thought those were a little clunky, but that's interesting. So hopefully now it's been redesigned so that, it's not that same amount of just like that same clunky kind of design, right? Where it's like half the word will fit in the bubble and then the other half is like out of it and all of that kind of stuff. So I haven't seen what it looks like in this, but hopefully that looks really, really good. So, all right. Energy. So there's also now the ability to see discrepancies in your energy usage. So what that also means that, when you start seeing, hey, there's some weirdness going on here, maybe you had a power outage, something like that, you can actually start to see what those look like compared to usual, right?
All right, so another feature, Rohan, coming in is energy discrepancies. It's probably my favorite feature of this release, only because I'm not using the new experimental section layout things. So in the energy dashboard, there is the ability to see individual devices and how they are using energy. What we have now is we have some people, myself included, that have the ability or have devices that are tracking their home energy usage from the meter. So in my case, I have a Rainforest Eagle that talks to my smart meter down here in Australia, and that's getting the actual meter read that my house is consuming in energy and that I'm going to be charged on my bill at the end of the month. And I can get that in real time. Now, what that means is that I only have a certain number of energy switches around the house that I'm monitoring. So I might only have a smart switch on my laundry, on my washing machine, on my dishwasher, which may only be 10% of my energy use, right? Now, Home Assistant will show you in the energy dashboard the difference between what your total energy use for the day is being tracked as and what you're tracking in the individual devices. So just to keep maths a bit simple, let's say I've used 100 kilowatts for the day and my dishwasher has used 20 and my washing machine has used 20. That means I have 40 kilowatts of energy that I've tracked. Home Assistant will now have an untracked usage in my individual devices bar, grey, to say that you've actually got 60 kilowatt hours that we don't know what you used on. And what's going to be good for that is that you can actually now see how much of your home's energy you actually are being able to see or get insights into, so that, in the example I just used, I can see that I'm tracking 40% of my home's energy use. So that will now prompt me that I should go and install more smart energy meters around the home and put them on devices, chuck it on the fridge, chuck it on the aircon, just to try and get, the percentage of where my energy is going to more closer to 100%. So then I can actually, have real world data, right? Like I can actually go, okay, 50% of my energy usage is from the aircon. Let's see if we can dial that down, or how can we improve that?
At least for those bigger things, right? Like maybe you don't care about like a little, I don't know, like a clock radio or something like that. But those bigger things might.
Like maybe you do have all the big things done, and now you go, wow, like, okay, maybe the clock radios or all the 100 clock radios I have around the house do need to be monitored, because maybe they're causing such discrepancies in my reporting, right? So yeah, this is why it's my favorite one, right? Like I like just this energy dashboard, just having the whole home overview of the energy usage, and now I have a way to say, actually, yeah, the amount of power calc and sensors and smart switches I have around the house is at a good place, that I'm tracking, a good amount of my energy usage. So yeah, I think the day I upgraded Home Assistant, for whatever reason, there was a discrepancy. So there is the ability for the discrepancies to have a negative value. So for example, if you have, I think the reason this happened to me was that I have a smart switch on my wife's monitor, so I can detect when she's sitting at the desk and her computer is on. For whatever reason, that monitor over-reported its energy usage for that day. So much so that when I looked at my energy usage for the day in the stats, I had used, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but let's say I used 20 kilowatts for the day. That's from the energy meter out the front of the house. The smart switch itself was reporting that it used 50 kilowatts for the day. So that means that, which is completely wrong, right? Like, so for whatever reason, the device system just got offline, or Home Assistant calculated incorrectly somehow. So what that means is that 30 kilowatt hours is in negative, right? And so on my energy, so Home Assistant is now smart enough to say, okay, there is a discrepancy here, and it will go into negative as well. So
Interesting.
if you are
Okay.
over reporting your energy usage. And this could be things, for example, there are a lot of virtual sensors like PowerCalc. It'll try and guesstimate
Yeah.
how much energy, those Philips Hue light bulbs are taking up that don't report their energy usage. It could be that those guesstimations are off, or maybe you're doing your own guesstimations, they could be off. So there is the potential for it to go into negative if Home Assistant is tracking more energy than you are actually using at the meter. So
Interesting. That's cool. Well, hopefully I'd love to see if there is some kind of negative there than just a little like bubble or something that pops up, right? Saying, hey, you're negative and that could be because of this, right? Because I could see, whether it's on the communities or something like that, or in GitHub or something like that, being people being like, well, it's negative. How's that possible? Right. And it's like what you said, Phil. Sometimes it's just, a switch that's reporting wrong or something that's calculated wrong somewhere, whether it's manual or automatic, right? So Home Assistant is now fully open source compliant. So Home Assistant has done an audit of all the integrations to ensure that that the project has permission to use all the libraries that it does. So that means what it does is it prevents someone from doing a takedown request or something like that against Home Assistant to be like, hey, here's a cease and desist. You're using our library. You're actually violating the terms. Off you go. Right. So this is, that's actually really cool.
I think we're sort of underselling how big of a job this must have been. Like kudos to whoever was involved at Navigator doing this, because there is a lot of, projects that contribute to Home Assistant, like Home Assistant has had to go into all their, third-party, libraries that they're using. So if, they're using Hue integration, they've got a third-party Hue Python package that they've had to go into and say, hey, do you have permission to use all these other libraries that you're requiring? The idea being that I think there was a case recently where someone was using committed something to Home Assistant, and someone actually reached out to Home Assistant and said, actually, no, this provider doesn't have it, although it is open source, they don't have permission to use it in a commercial setting or something like that. And you can't, therefore you don't have a license to use that. And they could have potentially asked GitHub to remove that from, to take, Home Assistant down essentially, right? And then what Home Assistant would wake up to is, the Home Assistant repository and all their Docker images being, just disabled, right? And GitHub, would have had to legally comply with that. So,
of course.
So now the Home Assistant's done a full audit. The goal being that if someone was to accidentally have a library that is not licensed correctly, the company or owner of that intellectual property can't go to GitHub or wherever Home Assistant is being hosted and say, please take that down, because they don't have permission to use that. So I could see this actually being like either a checkbox that needs to be made every time commits are going into the source code, or like an annual review needing to be done, because it's a lot of moving parts.
Well, and you got to keep track of technically every update could have every update to whatever you do underneath. Like if you update a library, technically that could have a license change there too, right? So depending on the versions that you use and so on and so forth. So that kind of has to be an ongoing check, I guess, right? So
all right, I'm going to try and explain this one. Paulus was very gracious to try and explain it to us on the creators call. So Yale smart locks. So Yale is a smart lock company. I use Yale on my own front door locks. With they've got nice little Z-Wave, Zigbee, Wi-Fi modules that you can get in your particular lock that you want to use. So Yale, the smart lock company, I believe. They brought out August smart locks as well.
That's right.
In the US. So Yale actually have, I believe they were Yale, and then they've split into the EU and US version of the company. Completely different entities now, but they both retain the branding rights of Yale to make it even more confusing. So
beautiful.
Yale US, Yale EU, completely different, but same name, same branding, all that. So
Same product?
I'm not sure. I believe it's probably similar. I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
too close. So the Yale lock component, if you're using the Wi-Fi, I'm guessing in this case, can actually be pretty slow at reporting status updates. So if you were to unlock your door, it would take a while for that Wi-Fi update to come through, right, to Home Assistant say the door's been unlocked. And in the smart home space, especially in our local environments where we're trying to do, automations fast, you may want to turn on the lights when you're unlocking the door, right? So it was. I believe I've seen like people on the forums complaining about this for ages, right? So the Home Assistant community, being the smart people that they are, discovered that there is a way to force these smart locks to refresh faster, and that is to easily just refresh the config on the Yale lock. So what we would have people doing is writing automations, every minute, every 5 minutes, refresh the configuration of these Yale locks, which would then cause the Home Assistant instance to go up to Yale's cloud servers and pull down the configuration. So if you can imagine everyone that's got a Yale lock that needed to do it this way, every 5-10 minutes, those Yale servers were getting slammed with API requests.
Yeah.
Yale reached out to Home Assistant saying that this was causing a strain on their servers. And I believe it's Yale EU have implemented an update. So if you're using the Yale European Union version of the smart locks, there is now a WebSocket that can be fired to I believe it will go to your Home Assistant instance, or be proxy through Nabokasa and down, so that you can get real-time updates to the lock, and your Home Assistant instance doesn't need to then reload the config all the time. If you're on the US version, I don't think there is a WebSocket available for it, so yeah, it could potentially result in Yale blocking those requests in the future. If this is going to cause strains on their servers, hopefully they would implement a similar WebSocket thing. But yeah, I was fascinated to see that.
Yeah,
because I had no idea that Yale was two different companies essentially now.
You know what? Good on Yale Europe for doing that, right? It's they could have done the MyQ kind of thing and be like, oh, this is too hard. We're just going to block everybody. Hopefully the US doesn't do that. Hopefully they follow suit and do that same kind of thing. And that's what even Haier or whatever it was, that air conditioning company that did the same thing, right?
Yep. What was the brand? The US version was like, nope, we're going to block you. And then the European version was like, oh, no, we're not. That's a completely different company. Don't talk to it we're not in any way involved in that.
Yeah. Or it was the other way or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just hopefully that doesn't, become the same scenario and Yale US is like, hey, we can do something similar too. Here you go, kind of thing. And what I love about this is they reached out to Home Assistant and said, hey, this is what's going on. You guys are overloading our servers. We'd love to come to a solution. And
yep,
here it is, right? This is what we came up with, and whatever, right? Like, thank you. Like that is actually supporting your users, and that's actually doing something positive to say there is a problem, it's hurting us, and let's come to the table and come up with a solution so that everybody can win here, right? So that Yale users aren't taking their Yale locks and chucking it out the door. You're at least using that stuff and continuing to use their products. Like, to me, if I was in Yale and I was in Europe, that is a reason to use it. Or if I'm not in Europe, if I'm not already on the Yale ecosystem, say, hey, let me actually jump on that when I need a new lock, because I feel supported, at least, right? Like, I feel like, again, anything can happen at any time, but at least, they can turn around and reverse their decision, do whatever. But at least at this point shows, hey, they're at least willing to come to the table, right? So,
exactly.
Hopefully, US follows suit, though. All right, Mastodon. If you have a Mastodon account, you can now add that in here and get some account summary. So followers, your following, statuses, and so on and so forth to the Mastodon integration. I think you should also follow me on Mastodon too. We'll post that in the show notes. There you go. Unsolicited plug.
Previously, there was only a notify service for Mastodon.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's now sensors available. So, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Motion blinds, if you're using the motion blinds integration, there is now the ability it's now got buttons inside Home Assistant for your favorite positions of those blinds. So, that's a little handy feature for you.
Yeah. Nest events. So Nest has been getting a little bit of love. So in this release, Alan Porter added a bunch of events for doorbells and motion events. So now, there's going to be more coming in and starting to make these things faster. But basically, yeah, long story short, there's new events or new event types. I don't know if I want to call it types, but new event that are happening in the Nest integration. So there you go.
And we had the big update to KNX, bringing in the configuration dashboard the other day for KNX. This release, there is now dedicated UIs for KNX lights and switches. So, yeah, there's a whole new panel and UI to manage those, which is very nice to see.
All right, let's talk about some new integrations. Claude LLM. So if you've been using Claude, it's similar to ChatGPT, but it's made by Anthropic instead of OpenAI. That LLM is now available in Home Assistant. That's cool. I was actually hoping to see that one in there because that's I tend to lean towards it. I just like the UI better, and I feel like it's a little more accurate when I ask it to generate me code or do any of those kind of things. So yeah, it's nice to see that that's in there. And I know Claude is picking up a little bit of steam too. It's even few people I've been talking to like, oh yeah, I started switching to Claude from OpenAI and started using that, and they seem to like it. So if you haven't, give it a shot. Even the free version just to see what's going on in there. I don't know if you can integrate the free version in Home Assistant, but yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
I do find that their limits are more aggressive. Like I definitely hit limits in Claude way before I would hit it in OpenAI.
Oh, really? I was going to say it would be the other way around. So would that be then it's more expensive than OpenAI?
Think so. I haven't done a price comparison, but again, a lot of times they'll do a slightly different model, so you can't really compare apples to apples kind of thing, right? So
yeah, they get tricky. All right, Nice Geo. So they are a garage door opening solution. You can now integrate that into Home Assistant as well.
Fujitsu HVAC devices that use ALF, the IoT platform, can now be integrated. There you go. It's controlled with the FGL Air app.
Very nice. SM Lite, you can now manage your SM Lite SLZB06 adapters from Home Assistant. So if you have one of those SLZB06 adapters, there you go.
All of these names are just going to really trip up the closed captioning on YouTube here. It's gonna be interesting to see what that looks like. All right.
Let alone to just understand what these what does SLZB06 even mean, right? Like I don't want to bag on Home Assistant here, but going from Home Assistant Sky Connect to the whatever they've renamed.
I can never remember the name.
Like Sky Connect was so easy to just tell people, if I want what device do I need? Go get a Sky Connect, right? Don't go like whatever part number, right? Like, I know there's a valid reason for it, but on one hand, we're moving away from YAML. We're moving away from all that other stuff to make, Home Assistant more user-friendly to non-technical people. We give it that, and then we take the nice product and Sky Connect name and replace it with a part number.
That's true. You can have a part number and an alias name, right? Like Sky Connect. And then the next version could be Sky Connect 2 or like Plus or whatever, right? Like it seems to work for Nest and all of those guys, right? This new hey, here's the Mini or like even if you look at the Amazon Echoes, same kind of deal.
Even Shelly, right? Like I bought my very first Shelly Z-Wave device to go inside a wall. I mean, I could have got the Fibaro one that I've already got in the walls, but I have another switch that I need to automate, and I could get the Fibaro Smart Relay for, I think it was $90 Australian, or I could get the Shelly Wave, which has just come out in Australia, for half the price. So I went to Shelly Wave, right? And Shelly obviously being predominantly Wi-Fi, I know this is Z-Wave because it's Shelly Wave, right? Like,
Yeah,
so yeah. There are ways to do it.
All right, last one. Roth Touchline SL. It's new integration for that, which is apparently an underfloor heating system. So there you go.
There's a whole bunch of breaking changes. Obviously, we don't mention them all on the podcast, so do check out the breaking changes or the non-backwards compatible changes before you hit that upgrade button, just in case you are using a feature that is impacted. We've picked out 3 top ones that I thought were important. One that I got tripped out on, the proximity entity has now been removed. It's been deprecated for 6 months, and Rohan, this will show you how annoyed I was at this change or how lazy I am at updating my configuration. I just left the repair there. Every release, it would come back and saying you need to update the proximity integration. And now this release, I did not get a choice, which was frustrating because I really wanted to see that energy discrepancy panel. Right? I was like, all right, you really need to go in and update all those proximity entities. Turns out it wasn't as bad as I was thinking. It's still like I still had to change, proximity.fill home to sensor.fill is home closer or something like that, right?
Right.
Global find and replace across all my YAML. But yes, if you were using the proximity integration like myself, it's now been officially removed and you need to upgrade to the proximity sensor entities.
Lutron, so the deprecated feature of fan as a light service has now been removed. I don't know if there was a ton of people using that one, but maybe there was. It's there. And now it's not. So there you go. Don't use it.
And for KNX, the climate modes have been renamed to rematch to the KNX specification or match the KNX specification. So yeah, instead of having, like heat, cool, there will be an official terminology that needs to be used in the KNX specification. Home Assistant will now comply with those so that they can be compatible with all of your KNX climate systems.
There you go.
Rohan, I do have a little personal shout out, and I'm going to risk here that people would have been listening, if they've been listening to previous episodes on the podcast, I've been complaining about my Zigbee battery devices just constantly going offline, right? Like I have like 70 odd devices, and it would be the same devices randomly, they would just die, right? Like they'll just go unknown status, and I have to go up, repair them without unpairing them from the controller, so that when they do get repaired, they keep the same room and they keep the same entity IDs and all that. It was frustrating the absolute buggery out of me, right? So I started Googling the problem again to see if anyone else had issues, and a random answer, and I just feel as though I should have done this the first time. I'm pretty sure someone even suggested it to me in Discord. And I said, no, I've done all that. So, and I say this as the risk of that now that I'm going to put this out publicly on the podcast, tomorrow I'm going to get a random device. It hasn't happened in the last 2 months, I think, since I've done this.
Okay.
Which, I was having to repair my hallway motion sensor every week or twice a week. So there is an option in the Home Assistant. So when you've got your Home Assistant Zigbee settings, if you go, you can actually download diagnostics for your Zigbee network.
Yep.
When you download that diagnostics or trace data or debug data, whatever it's presented in the UI, Home Assistant will prompt you to download a file. You download that file, and at the top of the file somewhere in the logs will be a note to say how overloaded the Zigbee channel that your controller is set to is. So when I downloaded mine, it said the Zigbee channel that my network was on was over 95% allocated, right? Which means that I probably have a conflict with other Wi-Fi networks, my own Wi-Fi network or neighbors, causing issues. So I went ahead, I bit the bullet. I struggled internally with this because 70 devices, I didn't want to have to go around repairing them all, right? I struggled with this internally, but I eventually bit the bullet. I chose a random channel. I did my research. I looked for it'll give you a list of channels in the logs, and it'll say, what channel is the best one to go to based on what the usage is. I chose another channel that didn't look like it had a lot of traffic on there. I then went through the UI. I changed the channel. I read the warnings saying some devices may need to be repaired. Some may not come with you. I then had to go. I think I started repairing. I had to repair basically all of my battery devices, which was a pain to say the least, but it had to be done. Most of my powered, some Hue bulbs came across, some didn't. Most of the powered Zigbee stuff did come across. As I said, it's been about 2 months, and I haven't had a battery device just randomly go offline unless the batteries run out.
Amazing.
So yeah, if you've been following along that little story and you've been, having similar issues, go in, check that diagnostics log for the Zigbee ZHA integration, or even Zigbee to MQTT. If you've got it, I'm sure they'll have something similar, and just find out, what the network utilization is. See if you can move your Zigbee channel to something different, and maybe that will help you out, like it's helped me out.
I don't know if they still do this, but I remember when you first reboot Home Assistant, and you look at the Home Assistant logs, you'll actually see if it's above a certain percentage, I believe it does say.
That's where I saw it.
Hey, it's going to be this percent overloaded, right? So it's on boot kind of thing. So, yeah. And I didn't realize it suggested other channels, so that's pretty cool.
So when you download, it may not say please use this channel exactly, but it gives you a little text-based ASCII graph, right, to say this channel above you is 80%, the channel below you is 17%, and this one's 0. You can actually see, okay, based on all these channels available, which one might be better for me to go to. I would suggest that when you then look at those Zigbee channels, that you then have a look on, just do some Googling around, find out what the corresponding Zigbee channel matches to a Wi-Fi channel is, particularly in different regions might have different Wi-Fi spectrums, channels, overlapping, all that fun stuff. There's a big rabbit hole you can go down Google for all that stuff. But yeah, just do some Googling, try and work it, make sure you're not going to go into a random Wi-Fi channel that could cause you issues or...
Yeah, hopefully that helps somebody out there. That's a great tip, Phil.
Otherwise, I think that's 2024.9.
I mean, so I have something cool that we a few of us did. So we had, Phil, as you know, we had my company's sales kickoff that happened in Vegas last week, and a couple of folks decided, hey, you know what, we should use this as an opportunity because it's a very large group of people attending. So a couple of folks, they decided, hey, you know what, we should tell the engineering team, hey, you know what, let's do something fun. And have you heard of Meshtastic, Phil, before in the past?
Have not. So, no, please explain. I have not.
Yeah. So I mean, it is one of those things where it's I've heard of it. I didn't really know what it was. Blah blah blah. So people were like, hey, let's get on this Meshtastic bandwagon and do something. So what it is it's a LoRa implementation, right? So where you can go in and say, hey, I've got this cheap little radio. It might be an ESP32 based one, or it might be something else. And based on that, you can go in and have a decentralized kind of messaging platform. Does that make sense?
And LoRa being the standard that can, I in my mind, the way I rationalize LoRa is that Z-Wave is, in your house. LoRa is, kilometers of range, right? And, you can go, very far with LoRa on very, even battery devices, right? In Australia, we would use them on farms or big properties, right, where you need to communicate, open close status or temperatures, very long distances. And I believe when Frank was on the podcast, I think he was saying that even in the country, maybe it was Frank, maybe it was another guest, that in European countries, because they're so small relative to Australia, that you can have LoRaWAN networks of people, you can communicate across the whole country, right? Based on these things.
Yeah, which is, so the cool part here is, and LoRa just stands for long range, right? LoRa. So stands for long range. And the idea here is, how do you build a series of wireless meshes that basically build out this giant LoRa mesh, right? And Meshtastic is one of those frameworks. You got to remember, there's no like LoRa as a protocol is kind of do whatever you want. Here it's this frequencies and does vary depending on country, whatever. And you kind of build your own stack on top of it, right? So Meshtastic is a stack that's kind of built with a specific purpose. You're not going to be doing real time audio on it or anything like, or you're not going to be doing any audio really on it, just because of how low bandwidth it is. It's pretty much text only. So if you're thinking like telemetry data and that kind of stuff, right? But a lot of folks said, hey, let's build out this arbitrary mesh in Las Vegas and communicate with each other offline, right? So even without any cell signal or no Wi-Fi, nothing like that, you can just hop on it and message each other. Totally random project. It was more just to see, can we get this off the ground? Yep. Can we do it? It was cool. It gave me a learning opportunity. I've mentioned on the podcast before, I've always wanted to play with some sort of LoRaWAN or LoRa implementation. And this just happened to be the one. So, I want to give a shout out to Matt and Wes, who kind of spearheaded that and got a bunch of us. I think at some point there was about, I don't know how many nodes there were in total. I'm sure somebody's doing the math right now, but there's 180 people, I think, in a group that were looking at doing it, and even if 50% of the people in there actually built a node and did something. And I know there's several folks that built multiple. I built two. A couple of my buddies at the company also built a couple. So, we probably had a decent coverage there. You just see a bunch of antennas, that people put up against the windows and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. Can it be done? It can be done.
All right. So this is like, because I haven't been to a Comic-Con, right? I just imagine this is similar to like, okay, so what do you do at a Comic-Con? So when you got this like thing on, right? Like you've just stuck this thing to your hotel window.
Yeah. And you carry one with you too, because you need that radio with you.
How do you then... Is this like ham radio? Like, oh, you can't talk on it. Okay, so...
Correct.
So you say you carry one with you. Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. We're at the end of the podcast. I'm just going to derail the podcast, the end of the podcast, just for the minute, right? We're because I am fascinated now. So, okay. How are you, like, communicating on this system? Like, how do you say, okay, I'm Rohan, I'm on this... Like, is it a frequency? Like, what?
Kind of. So you pick different. It's not a frequency, but you pick different channels, basically, right? It's typically auto selected, or you can pick your own if you need to for whatever purpose. And there's different settings on those as well from a LoRa perspective. So, depending on how dense your implementation is. So for ours, we actually had to tone it down. So by default, it's called, the channel's called long fast, right? That's the default implementation on there. Use that, I believe, channel number 20, I want to say. I'm sure somebody can keep me honest on, how much I remember this. And so based on that, what happens is, so it's long range fast, right? So again, typical theory and same kind of thing applies with most RF is, the longer it is, the slower it ends up becoming, right? So, and obviously there's different modulation you can do, et cetera, et cetera. So, so we were doing it on medium fast so that, we're not overly, just destroying the noise, right? You were talking earlier about your Zigbee radio and kind of the interference there, what percentage of the RF is saturated and so on. In that spectrum, for me in this case, it would have been same kind of deal in the LoRa spectrum. So there's ways of tuning a lot of that stuff and doing that. So and then we carried, a lot of us carried a node on us. Those connect via Bluetooth to your phone. There's an app, and you can just kind of message on there. You also get
and that was going to be my next question. How do you then like interface? Like,
there's a couple of different ways. So one
is there like an app, or is it because like I'm picturing like early internet, right? Like, yes, you've created TCP/IP, but IRC doesn't exist yet, right? So it's not like you're just going to jump on and broadcast out, right? Like,
Right.
how do you?
So you can so you can connect to the devices by Bluetooth typically. There's also Wi-Fi connectivity in some devices, so you can just hop on either use your laptop, whether through Web Serial and using Bluetooth through Chrome, or just how you'd kind of flash a ESP32 from new. So you can USB it, you can BLE do whatever, or Bluetooth. And do that. Or you can use the phone app, which works too. There's also a couple of implementation. There's one by, I want to say it's by LilyGo. They actually made a thing. It kind of looks like an old school BlackBerry. And that's an all-in-one device. So you actually don't even need to Bluetooth or anything like that. You just carry that device with you and you can just, hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Okay. And so how do you then, like, have you got usernames? Like, how does Rohan say, I'm Rohan, I want to join, I want to talk to this person over here and not just broadcast out to everyone on that mesh?
So there's a couple of things you can do. So there is not usernames, but it's kind of like node names. So this is just it's not Rohan, it's this node that's actually talking to you, right? Or Rohan just happens to be behind it. So there is a node name, and there's a short name. So you can be like, I don't know, like RN01, right? Like whatever, right? That kind of thing. So based on that, you can kind of come up with whatever, abbreviation you use. It's a four character short name, or there's a maximum character limit on what it is, but quite a bit longer long name that you can use. So I can say like, hey, this is like Rohan's node 1, whatever. So you might know as Rohan, right? So when you want to message each other, there's like a public channel. There's encryption behind it, right? So there's a public channel with it's not open, but I think the encryption key is like it's AQ == whatever that translates to in ASCII. So whatever that translates to ASCII becomes that whatever equivalent key. Or you can create your own channels. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to have a platform where I'm messaging people on my street, for example, I can have a whatever street name and a channel, and you can kind of do that there and chat on there, and or individual nodes you can kind of DM do the equivalent. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, really, what's the point? But it is kind of cool. I have actually a friend looking at it. He's climbing Machu Picchu later this month, I think. So he got a couple of these nodes. Again, I don't know what he's going to end up doing with it, but his idea was to have kind of in like a base station somewhere in his base, and then as he goes up, that way, one is, again, it could be a send for help kind of thing if there's somebody back at the base. Because again, a lot of times up there's no cell signal or anything like that, right? Again, I've never been to Machu Picchu, so I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there's not. I don't know. I assume there's not. So you can kind of do that. And the other thing too is it also, one of the things is if you have a GPS in there, it'll also automatically transmit your GPS coordinates too. So I think he wants to try and do some kind of tracking with that. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to do or how he's going to do it, but I think just to kind of say, hey, this is kind of how I went up and did whatever, right? I was at this base camp here, and then from there we did blah, blah, blah. So I think he just wants to capture all of that stuff and then deal with it after. If that ever comes, something comes from it, then I'll let you guys know. But I don't know, that seemed kind of cool. At least that way, there's something that he's got, at least from a communication perspective, right?
I will say that use case is a lot better than your example of getting the 100%. Neighbors onto, right?
Way better.
Getting neighbors onto the same WhatsApp group is hard enough. Could you imagine trying to get them onto this, right? Like,
it's so true. It's so true. And but yeah, no, it's I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's been something I just wanted to play with. And I just got a easy, low cost way of doing it, right, via Meshtastic, which is pretty cool. I do want to explore LoRa a little more. beyond Meshtastic just to see kind of from a sensor perspective and do that kind of thing. Again, it's very low bandwidth stuff. So, door open, door close is probably what you'll get a lot of. It's not necessarily meant to be like, hey, here's a selfie of whatever, or even more like, here's a video of whatever. In theory, can it be done? Sure. But, what is that? What is a good use of that bandwidth at that point, right? So it's not really what it was designed for. I'm sure somebody's figured it out. I'm sure it is possible, but yeah.
What's your fascination for LoRa? Like, have you got a use case in mind that you're trying to solve that you think LoRa could be useful for, or is it just you're curious and you want to use it for the sake of it?
Yeah, more the latter. Just curiosity. It's something that, again, kind of being in the industry, you always hear and you always you talk about IoT a lot, right? And especially in the industrial sense. LoRa is used quite a bit in various different industries, right? Farming, you mentioned, agriculture is a massive use case. I know there's a lot of use cases even around like mining and a lot of that kind of stuff too. So one, professionally, I kind of want to learn it. But two, obviously Meshtastic isn't what they would use in those kind of implementations, but it's hey, jump in, understand the fundamentals, and then build off of there, right? Was kind of my idea. And I just didn't have that fundamental, like what's the like the Lego kids robotics version of of LoRa, right? And so this is that kind of this is that jumping off point for me. So yeah, but it's cool. I'm intrigued. I've wanted to continue playing with it. So again, it's going to be a side thing, so it's going to go along with all of my other projects. But it's actually one that I see relevance for again, job wise and even home automation wise too. I think there are vendors that make sensors just based on LoRa, and you kind of need their receiver or whatever, right? Like I said, LoRa is not really like a hard standard. It's just long range, and it uses this spectrum. Like Europe has different spectrum, and US has different spectrum, whatever. So and then you kind of build on that. So,
well, I think I'll be interested to see, if you to come up with a valid home use case for it. I mean, I know you don't have kilometers of range to solve, but maybe there's just I need to put a sensor in my attic or basement or something that I don't want to touch for years, and it needs to talk to the other end of the house, or you've got a garage that's separate garage or something that needs to communicate. You don't need a lot of bandwidth, right? I know in Australia, like particularly, out in the country, probably similar for you, right, in Canada, like people would have, sheds, right, like, or garages or separate, they get their machinery or man caves or whatever, and they don't necessarily need internet out there, but they would like to know when the door opens and closes. But you're not getting a Zigbee signal that far. We're not getting a Z-Wave signal that far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about mailboxes quite a bit, right? Like mailboxes being on. Again, I still can't because that's Canada Post property, so I can't drill a hole through there or something. But and that's not something I'm going to do. If you have like a mailbox at the end of your really long driveway, where your Wi-Fi signal doesn't necessarily get to, or Zigbee Z-Wave doesn't get to, then there you go, right? Just something.
Even in Australia, right? Like in country towns, like you'll just see on the side of the road, and where it's off the road, all the houses on that road will have their mailboxes just at the end. So the postie just comes along and just goes and puts it all in their mailboxes on that end of the street, right? And then once a week, the farmer will drive, the 2 kilometers down the dirt track to see if he's got mail. And the mailboxes, I will say, are not mailboxes that you would see. Like, they are literally, like, the farmer's gone, bloody hell, I need a new mailbox. Kangaroo's taken the other one. So I'm just going to put, what have I got? Oh, here's an old, what is it, like they're just like plastic tubs, right? And you'll just see like a plastic tub on a stick with the numbers for the property on it on the side of a road somewhere, right? You'll just see a blue plastic tub. Oh yeah, that's a mailbox, right?
I love that the Kangaroo's taken one as is an actual thing.
It's probably
for you.
taken it. Probably not taken it. It's probably jumped over it, knocked it out with its tail or something.
Oh my god, that's amazing. That's that seems like a very Australia specific problem. But yes, I get I get where you're going with that. That's really cool.
But yeah, and that would be like a perfect use case. Like if you're a farmer or living out in the country and you do have like your mailbox super far away. There you go. That's a good use case for LoRa.
Totally, and you stick a solar panel on there, and a lot of these boards actually have solar and battery kind of management in it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like the one I wish it's in my bag somewhere that I haven't unpacked yet, but the one I have has one of the ones I have has both kind of for battery and solar and whatever, right? So you can just build an enclosure. What a lot of people have been doing is ripping out like little like solar like pathway lights and stuff like that, and just sticking that on their eaves trough and drilling a little hole through it, sticking an antenna through it, and off you go, right? And now you've got a node that's fully solar powered. You stick up, again, like I said, you put a battery in there, it'll charge the battery, so on and so forth, and off you go. Right? It's something that'll last probably quite a while, right? Until the battery fully drains or whatever, depending on what the battery pack you have looks like. But yeah, it's part of the reason why my desk looks like a bomb went off, because I've got like radio connectors and like whatnot on my.
You got all the fun little gadgets, yeah.
But yeah, and apparently TSA does not care if you take that through, because the design. I realized this as I was walking through the security line at the airport. The design I kind of did looks like like an industrial radio or like some kind of potentially explosive device that I'm walking
on an X-ray. It would look like yeah.
So they were like, yeah, go for it. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Cool.
And I made sure to label the antennas. I'm like 915 megahertz, like whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like and I was actually partially more concerned about. And again, this is engineer brain, right? I was more concerned about them worrying about my RF, what frequencies I'm talking over, rather than the fact that it's an explosive, or potentially like 3D print a better, smarter case if you're traveling. But again, they were fine with it, so there you go. There's no big red button on it or anything like that. So that was another.
Well, I think that is 2024.9. Thank you for tuning in to the LoRaWAN podcast. We're back. We're back for another one soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.